She had not touched a radio in 3 years. Her hands still smelled like coffee. Nobody on that plane knew who she was. But when both engines failed, she picked up a handset, and somewhere above the clouds, 2 F-22 pilots heard a name they would never forget. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. It was a Monday, March 14, Flight 2291 from Dallas to Chicago. Departure time 7:15 in the morning. Elena Reyes sat in seat 17A with her eyes looking out the small oval window. She was wearing a plain white shirt with the words, "Rick's Diner," printed on the front in faded red letters. Her jeans had a small tear near the left knee. Her shoes were old and the rubber on the bottom had started to peel away on one side. She had a small brown bag on her lap that held a sandwich she packed herself the night before. She looked exactly like what she was, a tired waitress traveling alone to see her sick mother in Chicago. The man sitting next to her in seat 17B opened a large leather bag and pulled out a thick folder filled with papers. He wore a dark blue suit. His watch was expensive and shiny. His shoes were polished so well that the ceiling lights of the plane reflected off them. He glanced at Elena once and then looked away. He did not say hello. He did not smile. People like him never talked to people like her on planes. She had learned that a long time ago. A flight attendant named Rosa walked down the aisle with a bright smile. She had glossy red lipstick and her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. She stopped at row 17 and looked at Elena with kind eyes. "Good morning. Can I get you something to drink before we take off?" she asked. Elena asked for a small cup of water. Rosa handed it to her with a warm smile. Then she turned to the man in 17B and her voice got a little softer, a little more careful, the way people talk when they are trying to impress someone important. Elena noticed. She always noticed things like that. It had been one of the things that made her so good at reading a room, reading a situation, reading danger before it arrived. That skill did not come from waiting tables at Rick's Diner in Abilene, Texas. It came from 8 years of flying fighter jets at speeds that most people cannot even imagine. It came from missions over mountains and deserts where a single mistake did not mean a bad tip. It meant death. Elena Reyes had once been Lieutenant Colonel Elena Reyes of the United States Air Force. Her call sign was Falcon. She had been given that name during her second year of combat training when her flight instructor, a hard and serious man who had never once complimented a student in 30 years, watched her pull out of a flat spin at 400 miles per hour and said quietly to the other instructor standing beside him, "That girl flies like a falcon. Smooth and fast, and she never loses sight of what she is hunting." The name stayed with her. It traveled with her through 2 combat deployments, through classified missions that would never appear in any newspaper, through a commendation she received directly from a 4-star general who shook her hand and told her she was the finest combat pilot he had ever seen. That was 4 years ago. Before the incident. Before the court hearing. Before the day she sat in a small room with 3 senior officers across a table and listened to them tell her that her career was over. She had saved 11 soldiers that day in the mountains. She had made a call that no manual approved, that no superior had authorized, that every rule said she should not have made. And it had worked. 11 men were alive because of what she did. But the 12th man, a young officer who had gone ahead of the others before she could reach him, did not come home. The military did not see what she had done as a rescue. They saw what she had not done as a failure. She resigned 3 months later. She moved to Abilene because she did not know anyone there. She took a job at Rick's Diner because the owner, a quiet man named Rick Flores, did not ask her any questions when she handed him a paper application with most of her employment history left blank. He just looked at her hands, which were steady even when the rest of her was falling apart inside, and said she could start Monday. That had been 3 years ago. Now she refilled coffee cups and carried plates of eggs and toast from 6 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. She was good at it. She was polite and fast and she never got an order wrong. The regulars liked her. Some of them called her Ellie. She did not correct them. The plane lifted off the runway and climbed steeply into the pale gray Texas sky. Elena watched the city shrink below her. She had always loved the view from up here, even as a passenger. The world looked quieter from above. Smaller. The problems that felt enormous on the ground looked like nothing more than small shadows when you were high enough. She ate half of her sandwich and then put the rest back in the bag. She was tired. She had worked a double shift the day before because one of the other waitresses had called in sick. Her feet still hurt and there was a small burn on her right forearm from a hot plate she had brushed against near the end of her shift. She leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. She was almost asleep when she felt it. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was a small vibration, almost nothing, that moved through the body of the plane the way a very faint tremor moves through the floor of a building before anyone else realizes there is an earthquake coming. Most people on that plane would not have noticed it at all. The man in 17B did not notice. Rosa, the flight attendant, walking back down the aisle with an empty tray, did not notice. The young couple in row 18, sharing earbuds connected to the same phone, definitely did not notice. But Elena noticed. Her eyes opened immediately. She sat straight in her seat. She kept her face completely calm the way she had been trained to keep it, the way a pilot learns to keep it because panic in the cockpit is the one thing that makes every other problem worse. She turned her head slowly to the left and looked at the engine mounted beneath the wing outside her window. For 3 seconds she watched it. Then she saw it. A faint shimmer of heat that was not supposed to be there. A color at the back of the engine that was almost invisible against the gray morning sky but was not quite right. Her stomach dropped very slowly, the way a heavy stone drops into deep water. That engine was losing oil pressure. She was certain of it. Not worried about it, not concerned about it. Certain. She pressed the button above her seat to call the flight attendant. Rosa came quickly. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Elena looked at her steadily. "I need you to go quietly to the cockpit right now and tell the captain that the left engine is showing signs of oil loss. Tell him to check his pressure gauges. Do not make an announcement. Just go." Rosa stared at her. She looked at Elena's worn shirt and her old shoes and the paper sandwich bag on her lap. "Ma'am, I am sure the pilots are monitoring everything, please," Elena said. She kept her voice low and her eyes level. "Go now." Something in the way Elena said it made Rosa move. She walked quickly to the front of the plane and knocked on the cockpit door. Inside the cockpit, Captain David Holt was 44 years old and had been flying commercial aircraft for 19 years. He was experienced and careful and he had an excellent record. His co-pilot, a younger man named First Officer Marcus Webb, was watching the instrument panel when Rosa knocked and passed the message through the small opening of the door. Captain Holt looked at Webb. Webb looked at the gauges. Then his face changed. "She is right," Webb said, his voice very quiet. "Left engine oil pressure is dropping. I just saw it. I thought it was a sensor glitch." Holt reached forward and his hands moved across the instrument panel quickly and carefully. "It is not a glitch," he said. 30 seconds later the plane shook. It was not gentle. It was a hard, sudden shudder that knocked a woman's coffee cup off her tray table and sent it spinning into the aisle. A child in row 23 started crying. The lights in the cabin flickered once. The man in 17B grabbed the armrest between him and Elena and said, "What was that?" in a voice that was trying to sound calm and not succeeding. "Left engine," Elena said simply. She was already looking at the wing. The captain's voice came over the speakers. He sounded controlled but Elena could hear the tightness underneath it, the way you can always hear the truth beneath the surface of a voice if you know how to listen. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a mechanical issue with one of our engines. This is not an emergency. We have 2 engines and we are in no danger. We are going to make a precautionary landing as soon as possible. Please fasten your seat belts and follow all instructions from the cabin crew. Most of the passengers began to breathe again when they heard it was not an emergency. Elena did not relax at all. Because 30 seconds after that announcement, the plane shook again. This time harder. This time the overhead bins rattled and 2 masks dropped from the ceiling of the storage compartment near the front. This time 3 people screamed. And this time, when Elena looked at the left wing, she could see something she could not see before. A thin line of black smoke trailing behind the engine. This was no longer a precautionary situation. The left engine was failing completely. And the right engine, which had been compensating for the left since the problem began, was now being asked to do too much. She could feel the difference in the plane's movement. The subtle pull. The slight heaviness in the left side. The way the aircraft was working harder than it should. The captain came on again. His voice was still controlled, but it was tighter now. Flight attendants, please be seated immediately. That phrase, spoken in that tone, meant one thing to anyone trained to understand it. This was now an emergency. Rosa was moving down the aisle toward her jump seat when she stopped at row 17. She looked at Elena. "Who are you?" she asked. It was a strange question to ask in that moment, but it was the right question. Elena held her gaze. "Go to the front emergency radio panel," Elena said. "There is a secondary communication system behind the first-class partition. It has a switch labeled ATCM, turn it to the military channel. Then bring me the handset." Rosa stared. "How do you know that?" "Please," Elena said. "We have very little time." Rosa went. She came back 40 seconds later with the handset, her hands shaking slightly. Elena took it and her hands were not shaking at all. She pressed the transmit button and spoke in a voice that came from a completely different part of her than the part that served coffee and carried plates. It was a clear, flat, absolutely steady voice. The voice of someone who had used a radio in situations where the next word spoken might be the last word spoken. "Any military aircraft on this frequency? This is Falcon. I am aboard United Airlines Flight 2291 out of Dallas. We have catastrophic engine failure in progress. Both engines compromised. 209 souls aboard. Requesting immediate military assistance and priority landing coordination. Falcon, over." There was silence on the channel for 4 seconds. In an aircraft losing engine power at 31,000 feet, 4 seconds is a very long time. Then a voice came back. It was a young voice, trained and precise, but there was something underneath the precision that was not quite steady. "Flight 2291, this is Eagle 3, United States Air Force, operating on standard patrol frequency. Did you say Falcon? Please confirm your identifier, over." "Confirmed," Elena said. "Falcon. Lieutenant Colonel Elena Reyes, retired. I need your current position and I need you to contact your ground command for emergency civilian assistance immediately. We are losing altitude. I estimate 12 to 14 minutes before we lose controlled flight. Over." Another silence. This one only 2 seconds. Then the voice came back and it was different now. The precision was still there but something else had entered it. Something close to awe. "Flight 2291, copy that. We have your position on radar. Stand by. Eagle 3 to command, this is an urgent relay. We have a civilian aircraft emergency. Pilot on secondary channel identifies as Falcon. Repeat. Falcon. Requesting immediate F-22 scramble and emergency landing clearance, all northern Illinois fields. Command, please advise. Over." In a command center at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, a senior controller named Major Patricia Green was sitting at her station when she heard the transmission. She had been in the Air Force for 16 years. She had worked hundreds of emergency situations. She was not a person who showed reaction easily. But when she heard the name Falcon come through her headset, she sat forward in her chair and her right hand went immediately to her emergency scramble panel. Eagle 3, this is command. Scrambling 2 F-22s now. ETA to your position 6 minutes. Confirm Falcon is aboard the civilian aircraft. Repeat, confirm Falcon is physically aboard Flight 2291. The young pilot on the patrol aircraft responded without hesitation. Command, confirmed. Falcon is aboard and she is talking us through it. Over. Major Green pressed the scramble button. Then she said quietly to the controller beside her, "Get me the best runway within 40 miles of that aircraft's current position. And somebody call the base commander. He is going to want to know about this." Back on Flight 2291, Elena had already opened a connection to the cockpit through the handset. Captain Holt's voice came through and she could hear everything in it now, all of the experience and all of the training, and underneath all of that, the very human fear of a man who understood exactly what was happening and understood that he was running out of options. "I am going to be honest with you," he said. "Right engine pressure is dropping. I do not know if I can maintain altitude for more than another 8 minutes. "You do not need altitude," Elena said. "You need heading. Turn to 270 and begin a controlled descent rate of 800 feet per minute. Not faster. I need you to stretch this glide as far as it will go." "There is no airport at that heading within range," Holt said. "There is a military airfield," Elena replied. 11 miles. Runway is 9,000 feet. More than enough. Military units are already coordinating your approach. You are not landing alone, Captain. I am here. The Air Force is coming. We are going to put this airplane on the ground." There was a pause that lasted exactly 1 second. Then Captain Holt said, 270. 800 per minute. Understood. 4 minutes later, the 2 F-22 Raptors arrived. The passengers near the windows could see them, one on each side of the aircraft, close enough that the military markings on their wings were clearly visible. Several people gasped. The man in 17B made a sound that was not quite a word. A woman 3 rows back burst into tears and then stopped crying almost immediately when she saw the jets, as though the sight of them had replaced her fear with something else. Something that felt, improbably, like hope. The lead F-22 pilot's voice came through the channel. His call sign was Ghost. His real name was Major Daniel Okafor and he had been flying F-22s for 6 years. He had heard the name Falcon for the first time when he was a flight cadet, in a lecture about exceptional combat airmanship. He had heard it again 3 years into his service, from a veteran pilot who had served alongside Elena during her first deployment and who had said, without any exaggeration in his voice, that she was the best pilot he had ever seen. "Falcon, this is Ghost. We are on your wings. What do you need?" Elena's voice was the same as it had been from the first word. Calm. Flat. Absolutely certain. "Ghost, I need a visual on both engines from your position. Left engine first. Tell me exactly what you see." Ghost descended slightly and moved his aircraft closer to the left wing of the airliner. What he saw was not good and he reported it without softening it because Falcon had not asked him to soften it. "Left engine is completely out. No rotation. Heavy carbon scoring on the nacelle. Oil streaking along the wing surface. Right engine." Ghost moved across and looked. "Right engine is running but I can see vibration in the cowling. She is working hard. Too hard. Fuel stayed on our wing surfaces. No fuel leak visible." "Good," Elena said. "That is the one thing we needed." She went back to Holt. "Captain, you are in better shape than you think. Both wings are clean. You have a dead left engine and a struggling right. But you have enough. I need you to reduce power on the right engine to 60%. I know that feels wrong. Do it anyway. You are putting too much stress on it and if that engine seizes completely, we are in a different conversation. Holt did not hesitate this time. 60%. Done. The aircraft shuddered once and then, almost imperceptibly, steadied. Not perfectly. But enough. The man in 17B turned to Elena. Are we going to make it? He asked. Elena looked at him. Yes, she said. And she meant it. The airfield appeared through the cockpit cameras that were being streamed on the emergency monitors now, a long gray strip cut through flat Illinois farmland, lined on both sides with flashing emergency vehicles, their lights small and red and white against the pale winter ground. Ghost called out the approach markers one by one. Elena relayed them to Holt in clean, simple language. Airspeed. Descent rate. Alignment. Distance remaining. She did not use technical language for its own sake. She used the words that a pilot needed to hear, in the order he needed to hear them, to land a plane with one dead engine and one struggling engine with 209 people aboard. You are slightly high, she told him at 4 miles out. Increase your descent rate to 1100 for 30 seconds, then bring it back to 900. You need to lose that altitude now while you have room. Holt did it. The plane dropped a little faster and several passengers grabbed their armrests. Then it leveled. Better, Elena said. You are aligned. You are going to make this runway, Captain. Trust your hands. The wheels touched down at 141 knots. It was not a smooth landing. The aircraft bounced once, came down hard on the rear gear, and shook violently as the brakes engaged and the emergency systems deployed. People were thrown forward against their belts. Bags fell. Someone in the back screamed a single short scream and then went silent. But the aircraft stayed straight on the runway, and it slowed, and it slowed, and it slowed, and finally it stopped. For one moment there was complete silence inside the cabin. Then the man in 17B started clapping. One single person clapping, and then another, and then a third, and within 5 seconds the entire cabin was applauding and several people were crying, and Rosa the flight attendant was standing in the middle of the aisle with both hands pressed over her mouth and tears running down her face. Elena Reyes sat back in seat 17A and let out a long, slow breath. Her hands, resting on her knees, were still not shaking. They never shook. It was the one thing she had never been able to explain to anyone who asked her about it. She did not know why her hands were always steady. They always had been. The emergency crews reached the aircraft in under 2 minutes. Paramedics boarded and began moving through the cabin checking passengers. No one was seriously hurt. A few bruises from the hard landing. A man near the back had hit his head lightly on the seat in front of him. A child had a small cut on her palm from a piece of plastic that had broken off an armrest. That was all. 209 people, and not one of them had a serious injury. Ghost and his wingman landed at the base and were walking across the tarmac toward the airliner when the passenger stairs were brought into position and people began coming off the plane. Ghost was looking for a pilot. He expected to find someone in a uniform. Someone with rank insignia. Someone who looked like what the word Falcon meant to him when he heard it in lecture halls and briefing rooms. He found a woman in a faded diner shirt and old jeans standing at the bottom of the stairs. She was shorter than he expected. She looked tired. There was a small burn mark on her right forearm. She was holding a brown paper bag with the remains of a sandwich inside it. Ghost stopped in front of her. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall and had been decorated twice for distinguished flying. He had met generals and senators and once, briefly, a president. He had never in his life felt what he felt in that moment, standing in front of this quiet woman on a cold Illinois airfield. He came to attention and saluted her. "Ma'am," he said. "It is an honor." Elena looked at him for a moment. Then she returned the salute. "Old habits. You flew well today, Ghost," she said. "So did you, ma'am," he replied. "So did you." The story moved fast. By the time the ambulances had finished at the airfield, the first news cameras were arriving. Someone on the plane had been recording audio from almost the beginning, and the recording of Elena's voice on the radio, so flat and calm and certain, was already being shared across the internet. The part where she said, "This is Falcon," and the silence that followed it before the young patrol pilot's shaken response was being called one of the most remarkable moments ever captured on an aviation radio channel. The man in 17B, whose name was Robert Calloway, walked up to Elena before the news crews could reach her. He was carrying his expensive leather bag, and his polished shoes were now scuffed and dirty from the tarmac. He looked different than he had looked on the plane. Smaller, somehow. More human. "I did not introduce myself on the plane," he said. "I am sorry for that." Elena shook his hand. "It is all right," she said. "I did not introduce myself either." He laughed at that. A real laugh, not a polished one. "I am on the board of 3 aviation companies," he said. "I have spent my whole career in this industry, and I have never seen anything like what you did today. I want you to consider something. We have been looking for someone to lead a new flight safety division. The work involves redesigning emergency response protocols for commercial aviation. The kind of work that could change how every airline in the world trains its crews." Elena looked at him. "That is a large thing to offer a waitress," she said. He shook his head. "I am not offering it to a waitress," he said. "I am offering it to Falcon." Elena did not answer him immediately. She looked past him at the airfield, at the 2 F-22s parked 100 yards away, at the long runway where Flight 2291 sat with its left engine dark and cold and its right engine finally at rest. She thought about the 12 months after she resigned, when she did not sleep more than 4 hours at a time and could not drive past an airfield without feeling something break open inside her. She thought about the 3 years at Rick's diner, about the regulars who called her Ellie and did not know anything about her, about the way she had learned to be quiet and small and contained. She had thought that was healing. Maybe it was, for a time. But standing on this airfield now, with the cold wind on her face and the smell of jet fuel in the air and Ghost salutes still warm in her memory, she understood something she had not understood before. She had not been healing at all. She had been hiding. And there was a difference. "I will need to think about it," she told Calloway. "Of course," he said. He gave her his card. Rosa found her before she left the airfield. The flight attendant had been crying and had stopped and then started again, and now her mascara was a mess and she did not care at all. She put both her hands around Elena's right hand and held it. "I should not have hesitated when you told me to go to the cockpit," she said. "I looked at your shirt and you went," Elena said. "That is what matters. You went." A young boy, perhaps 8 years old, was standing a few feet away with his mother. He was holding a model airplane. Not a commercial airliner. An F-22, the same kind that had flanked their plane on the way down. He was looking at Elena with enormous eyes. His mother nudged him gently and he walked forward. "My dad is in the Air Force," he said. "He flies jets." Elena crouched down so she was level with him. "What is his name?" she asked. The boy told her. Elena did not know the name, but she smiled. "He is doing something important," she said. "Just like you are going to do something important one day." The boy looked at his model F-22. "Were you scared?" he asked. Elena thought about it honestly, the way she always tried to answer honest questions. "There was no time to be scared," she said. "There was only time to work." He seemed to find this satisfying. He nodded seriously, the way children nod when an adult has told them something true. 6 weeks later, Elena Reyes gave notice at Rick's diner. Rick Flores accepted it without making her explain anything. He just nodded and told her she was the best employee he had ever had and that she was welcome back any time. She believed he meant both things. She did not go back to the Air Force. That door was closed and she had made peace with that. But she accepted Robert Calloway's offer. She moved to Chicago. She worked in an office that had large windows looking out over Lake Michigan, and she spent her days redesigning the emergency training systems used by commercial pilots across the country. She worked with captains and co-pilots and flight attendants. She taught them how to communicate under pressure. She taught them what to listen for in an engine that is beginning to fail. She taught them, in simple and direct language, that staying calm is not a feeling. It is a choice you make every single second until the wheels are on the ground. She was very good at this work. Perhaps because she was not just teaching from a textbook. She was teaching from something that had happened at 31,000 feet on a cold Monday morning over Illinois, when a tired waitress in a faded diner shirt had picked up a radio handset and said a name that changed everything. A name that had once been given to her by a flight instructor who watched her fly and saw, in the way she moved through the air, something rare and precise and completely without fear. Falcon. She had tried to leave that name behind in the mountains of a foreign country on a day when she could not save everyone. She had buried it under 3 years of coffee orders and early mornings and the quiet politeness of a life lived small. But names like that do not stay buried. Skills like that do not disappear. And the people who carry them, no matter how ordinary they look on the outside, no matter what seat they are sitting in or what shirt they are wearing, do not stay hidden forever. Not when the engines fail. Not when the radio crackles. Not when someone needs to hear a voice that does not waver. Not when the world needs a falcon.